special Star Trek episode of Stop Shitting All Over Yourself. Today I am here with, of course, Elaine Federico, who I consider her to be one of my major introductions to Star Trek. Last time we talked about life lessons from Star Trek. Today we're going to be talking relationships in Star Trek. Okay, so while I drink and recombobulate, Elaine, why don't you tell us? So let's start by you telling me let's go with first the most unlikely pairing.
Well, and I'll definitely talk now and fill in time while you try to get your saliva back where it's supposed to be. So they had a poll recently, and I think it was on the Facebook group, the Star Trek Family, which is an awesome Facebook group if you really want to join a group that's got very, very good admins and moderation. So we don't tolerate any kind of bullying or any kind of crap like that. And actual Star Trek actors and producers and other contributors, technical contributors, makeup artists, scene designers, that kind of thing are in that group. So there's a ton of information in there. You can hear all about stories from the past series, what was going on behind the scenes. Really, really interesting group. So Star Trek Family, find it on Facebook if you'd like to join. We'd love to have you. But they had a poll recently, and it was about it was literally about who would be your worst pairings. And they said, people, go ahead and add a poll option if you want. And people had Kai Wynn and Luxana Troy. And they had these bizarre Gul Dukat and Quark. They had these really bizarre choices. So that got me thinking about some of that. And I mean, you really could go in so many different directions with that. But do you mean most unlikely pairing as far as people who maybe should
who actually did? So for me, my most unlikely pairing was Ro Laren and Guinan, because when you think about Ro Laren, so angry, bitter, wants to be left alone. She's just not she's aloof. She's aloof when she first joins when she first joins the Enterprise. And Guinan is so empathic and listening and
she's a listener. Yeah.
She is a listener. And, she just sits there and has the best interaction with Ro Laren, where they're, what I really like about that is that Guinan is empathic enough to understand that Ro Laren doesn't want to be left alone. She just shoves people away because she's so afraid of being rejected that she doesn't feel she feels like that's her only option. And
yeah. So should we give a little synopsis of this episode in case people have not?
Go ahead, give a synopsis.
Okay. So in Rascals, there's a transporter accident, and the crew that is on the away team, which consists of four members. And so it was, for some reason, this is a weird group of people. If you think about it, why was this happening?
Why were they together?
There's a reason. They had attended some kind of, and so Captain Picard was with them. Guinan had gone, I guess, because she was learning bartending techniques. I have no idea. And then Keiko O'Brien went because there was something to do with botany, and she was just studying some plants or whatever. And Ro Laren went, I don't know why, to learn diplomacy. I mean, who knows? So these four had gone on this away mission, but when they beamed back to the ship, they were rematerialized as approximately 12 years old. So some people said, well, this is kind of nice because you have an opportunity to do your childhood over again. Counselor Troy was trying to advise Captain Picard, well, you can do your childhood over again. And this might seem palatable to some of us because maybe we want to go back and fix past mistakes. But in the process of coming to terms with their new 12-year-old bodies, same mind, but 12-year-old body, and sort of took Ro Laren under her wing and said, well, listen, I think there are opportunities as a child to be joyful. And it doesn't seem like you had a very joyful childhood. And certainly because Ro Laren said, well, no, I mean, as a child, I grew up as a Bajoran. I guess she would have been under the occupation, right? So I guess
did. So she says, Guinan was like, didn't you enjoy your childhood? She goes, I spent my childhood in a detention camp. And she was very I had a really shitty childhood.
Yeah. So she was under Cardassian rule. So here Guinan is trying to say, now Guinan, here's a person who's lived 700 years at this point or whatever. really, really, lifetimes of living here for as far as we're concerned. So she thought, gosh, I mean, with all this knowledge that she has, she's trying to advise her. You have an opportunity now to go back and do your childhood and actually let it be a happy one, because here you are on this starship, this galaxy class starship with all of these modern amenities. You can have a choice to make a totally different, choose a different path. So yeah, they have this kind of weird friendship. And towards the end of the episode, I think that R'Laren starts to take some of her advice, and she decides to jump on the bed, and she decides to color with the crayons, and she kind of revisits her childhood, which we could do another podcast on that.
I was just gonna say, let's just run with that now, because like this is a really great topic. Because like
cool
I feel like,
and what would you do if you could redo your childhood? What would you do?
Like right now, so I feel like, the older you get, like R'Laren is still a little young. She's still like, even though she goes down to 12, like she's still probably like 30, 31 when she gets, goes through the accident, right? So she's still a little bit young, still a little bit angry, still a little bit bitter. And I feel like, like you said, Guinan is like 700 years old. So she has enough experience to recognize that experiences are rare and that this is a really great opportunity to revisit.
Yeah.
And I feel like, for me, I think that I would have maybe a few years ago, I probably would have been more like R'Laren, where it would have just been like, I would have been angry and upset how it was interfering with my day and my work and my life and all this stuff that's happening. But I feel like right now, like I might play in the mud a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like I really enjoyed when I was little, my imagination, I would run through the yard with my sister and we'd murder plants by pulling off their leaves and whatever and pretend like we were living in the jungle, right? Because we were living, it was like tropical garden, so like it looked like a jungle. And
are you talking are these years in Pakistan growing up
years
there?
in Pakistan?
Okay.
Yep. So like we had like all the, it's very like, hot, humid, palm trees, wonderful. It was just wonderful. And like, and so, and those are the kinds of things that, the West considered exotic. So the kinds of movies, when we watch Western movies, they always had somebody doing something exotic in the tropics. So for us, we were like, oh my God, look how exotic we are, and so we'd like, we're going to eat the exotic plants and, whatever it is that we're doing. And I think I would really enjoy, there was such a innocence, like you just you say something and you just believe it, right? It's like, oh, this, you pull off some leaves and be like, oh, this is food. Yeah, sure, it's food. Let's do that.
We used to pull so much crap and eat it. Like, what the heck were we thinking?
How are we still alive?
I know.
I'm eating this. What is it?
Well, I mean, because I grew up in South Florida, so it's kind of the same thing. Because if you think Fort Lauderdale, Miami, that's the jungle, and so we all, just play outside all the time, and it was never cold. So,
what would you do?
But do you have regrets? Do you have any regrets that you would do differently if you could fix it or go back?
I wouldn't. I don't. Okay, so I feel like because like obviously in this case, if I could actually go back to my childhood, like right now with the knowledge that I have now, I think I'd try to be a lot nicer to my mother.
I was gonna say, would this involve your mom? Because
yeah, it would. I would be a lot nicer to my mother. Like I think that's the one. If I look back on my life in terms of most of my regrets, I feel like okay, it ended, got me where I'm at. I'm good. The one thing that I feel like I did somebody wrong is I think my relationship with my mother. Like I would just be more empathetic, more compassionate. I mean, I was a teenage girl, exactly like my mother. And she said that all the time. She's like, we're exactly the same. Like. So I feel like I would just be a little bit less me.
But it was probably fine. I mean, she probably had much more knowledge than you even knew. And so she probably accepted you and just thought, and she knew, because moms know. So she knew.
Moms know.
Just like, she doesn't mean what she's saying. She's just being a teenager.
Man, no, what about you?
I think, gosh, I don't know. Go to more Star Trek conventions.
I would have been more like, I would have been less obnoxious about like, how like you feel adolescents feel like they have to hate everything or you have to feel like your opinions are so important. I don't think my opinions would matter as much as they did. I'd just be like, it's really not that big of a deal. I can like both Star Trek and Star Wars.
I mean, I think I have more things I would fix that I did in my 20s. Like, I think I might, I wouldn't probably mess with the childhood necessarily, because what could I do? I was going to be a nerd. So there's just none of that. You're never going to fix it. So anyways, but in my 20s, before my dad, because again, and my dad died and I was 26. So I was just starting to have these really great conversations with him. It was like he finally took his head out of his ass for the first time in his life. And it was just so ironic that he was finally coming to me for like advice on relationships and all of these really cool conversations that I never had the chance to have with him. And then he got cancer. So like, I think I would want to just do more talks with him and more talks about family. And because when they're gone, there are so many questions that you can't ask anymore. So I think I would have gone back and just asked more about his side of the family or my childhood as far as his perceptions of me. Cause you just can't ask those things now, so.
It's true. It's
Would do
true.
that.
And it's interesting because I have been trying to like find my own roots and things like that, so I've been really digging deep because like my American slash white side is fairly easy to follow, but my Indian
Mm.
side is a little bit harder. So like absolutely I can see how like having that information would be incredibly valuable. Fortunately, my grandfather was
Yeah.
an author, so he wrote a whole bunch of shit in books. So he
That's so cool.
wasn't a very interesting writer though. Like I read like he's very pedantic. He's very academic in his writing. So it's like you read it and you're like, oh my God, I can't stay awake.
Good. It's good Ambien for you there.
It is. I'm like, I'll start reading, but I'm out. But I think one of the parts about like the friendship that I liked so much about Rolaren and Guyanan was that they are an unlikely pair. And it's like I think we all get stuck in our own way of being. And like this was an opportunity, like in a close, almost
Well,
like a
was this,
vacation.
you know, so Rascals, so we're going to talk about another episode now. So Rascals was the last season, right? I think that was the seventh
Season
season.
6. It was season 6.
Oh, was it six? All right. Was it after though the episode with, maybe it was called Ensign Rowe? What's the episode where dude, I'm really losing my mind. The holidays killed me. So she's like recruited by the higher ups at Starfleet to do
That's
this
Ensign
mission.
Rowe.
Okay. So in the Ensign Rowe episode, that's really where that friendship is gelling, because
Yeah.
that's where Guinan goes to Captain Picard, on Ensign Rowe's behalf and says, listen, this is my friend. And that's all she has to say. Because from that moment, he knows Guinan doesn't use that term lightly. So if you are her friend, I'm going to listen to you and I'm going to trust you. That's a big deal. So they kind
It
of
is.
feel that.
That whole episode I really liked because it reminded me, a lot of like, I think Ensign Rowe reminds me a lot of me when I was younger, bitter, angry, that kind of thing. And like, you just need the right person to kind of like get in under,
Well, okay, let me ask you this. So what was it, do you think? Maybe maybe you don't, but what had made you so bitter? Like what had made you
I
why?
don't know. I like when I look back now, I'm like, why was I so angry? Like, I don't know why I was so angry, but I know that I was really mad. Like, I was so angry from the time I was like, I don't know, probably like 17 or 18 till I was in my 20s. Like, I had this underlying seething rage. One could argue that some of it's trauma, but like the truth of the matter is like I don't actually know, like it's all gone now, but one of the things that Alex and I talk about a lot now is what were we so mad about? Like I'd listen to Nine Inch Nails and I'd be like, right? But now I listen to Nine Inch Nails and I'm like, I just can't muster up that level of anger anymore. Like,
I know.
that's
I
so
do.
much energy.
True. And I remember, I do know what I was angry about when I listened to that stuff, but I had specific things, but it's true. I think maybe age softens us or something, but it's funny to think that some people never shed that anger though. And I think another thing that's really interesting when you talk about relationships and friendships and things, and in that episode, Ensign Rowe, so you have Picard and you have Guinan. Now, right there, you already have this undercurrent of trust.
Yeah.
Because for many times, Picard has referred to Guinan as like their relationship goes beyond friendship. Like and yet it's not sexual, so you have this really cool kind of platonic but extremely close relationship with the two of them. And I don't even know if there's a term for that, because when he says it goes
like
beyond
soul
friendship,
friends.
yeah, like it's very deep.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where like I would die for you. but we're not lovers and we're not in love. And that to me is really interesting. Who portrays that really in modern media? It's very rare. And it's hard to come up with examples of that, but Star Trek is actually full of them.
Is actually, you know what's interesting? I'm glad you brought that up because I think like it's a really good illustration of how we were molded as children, watching these types of shows. And so like, you've got their relationship, right? And then you've got the Riker Troy relationship, which I actually find even more bothersome as an adult than I did when I was younger, where like both, so for those of you who have not seen, like Will Riker and Deanna Troy have had a long-standing relationship. They broke up because he wanted to pursue his career as a captain, and so, but she's been with him the whole way through. There's a word, she's his imzadi, which is like soulmate, like deep connection. And but like, and the two of them wanted the relationship to be just like a normal couple relationship without drama or anything like that. But the writers kept trying to force these like bizarre sexual scenarios with them and other people, or jealousy or whatever. And I feel like those kinds of stories influenced me growing up, right? And like, I feel like, whereas on one hand, Star Trek does a really good job of showing platonic relationships and even deep relationships between exes, on the other hand, they set up like a really unhealthy dynamic for like what relationships, like what sexual and romantic relationships could be like, because they didn't really have any great examples.
Well, right there, I think also it was, the era, it was that time, it was the 80s, early 90s. So this is what was going to pass on network TV as being a relationship people could understand. But I think what's really interesting is the episode with Devanani Rall. Now it's going to kill me because I'm going to have to try to think of the name of it. So this is the one where the wormhole was discovered by the Barzans, and so it was up for bid to whichever planet
the Ferengi
bid on the wormhole, and that's how the two Ferengi get stuck in the Delta Quadrant, and they wind up on Voyager. So, which is a lovely tie-in. I love the fact that they did that because it cracked me up. But anyway,
great episode.
I think it's called The Price. I want to say it's called The Price. So when one of the tactics, because Riker is now representing the Federation since the original representative was poisoned by the Ferengi, so he's out of it. So Riker steps in to negotiate for the Federation, for the rights to this wormhole. And Devanani Rall, who's negotiating for, I forgot the name of the people that he's negotiating for. Somebody's
looking it up now.
Like, you idiot.
He is. It's the Chrysilians, the Caledonians, and then the Ferengi.
Yeah, because the Caledonians wind up throwing their bid in with him, and the Ferengi.
This idiot. Now that I see his face, I know that. I was like, this idiot. Yeah.
So one of his tactics, one of Rall's tactics, is to say to Riker, because Devanani Rall, he turns out to be like a quarter Beta Z or something. So like he's sitting here and he's got these empathic abilities and he's like reading people. And when Deanna finds this out, she's incensed because they're now involved in some kind of sexual relationship. And Rall tries to use that against Riker by saying, hey, she's a lovely woman. I really enjoy my time with her, but you didn't see the value in her, so you lost her too. And that's when I love this part though, because this is so good. Riker turns to him and says, you know what? That's the first bad play I've seen you make. If you can bring Deanna, if she brings you some measure of joy in your life and she can turn give you some kind of conscience, then more power to you. I'm happy for her. I hope you guys are. And then he says like to the last mile and he walks out of the bar. But I think that's really great because that does right there show a maturity on the fact that Riker and Troy can have they can still have a friendship, but they can be happy for each other when they do get with somebody who's lovable and valuable. And I don't think that Riker for a second takes this guy seriously. And I don't think Riker assumes anything about that relationship. He probably figures it's going to be very short-lived. But the fact that he's able to say that, I thought that was really good because I think it shows that you can have the maturity to be friends with your ex and you can work together. And, so that's one of those relationships I think that was good to try to emulate. So,
and you know what? I love that scene. You actually picked out, like, I don't like that episode because I tend to like, I find that guy such a annoying, like he's so annoying, but he's really annoying. He's just like got this cocky, like slime. You know what it is? It's like cocky. The kind of attitude that like if your girlfriends at a bar were there, they would just be like, red flag, red flag, red flag, stay away from him. But Riker's moment where he like the level of confidence that he has in their relationship and their, and their understanding is like it transcends, like whatever sexual relationship that they had. And ultimately, they do end up getting married and having children.
They
Spoiler
do.
alert. So like, clearly their relationship is like super deep. I just wish, and I recognize that it was obviously they were a product of the times, like, and so I can look at it from that lens.
Mhm.
But when I think back now, I see all of the wonderful Troy Riker moments we missed, that like we could have had if they
Yeah.
had been like a couple on the show.
I mean, because you think of what else was on network TV at the time, like Friends and, some of these other shows, which are great, but like they do show a lot of coupling up and pairing off and sexual stuff. And it was like the 80s and 90s. And there was just a lot of that. It was very lighthearted. It was kind of fluff, and I
And it
guess
was
they just
very
had to,
much keeping people apart. Like that was part of the
yeah.
thing in the 80s, in the 90s. Like it was all about keeping them apart from each other. Oh, moonlighting. That was another big one that was big in the 80s around that time. Like
I
you
love that show.
oh
I
my God, I
really love
love
that show.
moonlighting. It was so good.
So, yeah, David and Maddie. But when you first said about friendships in Star Trek, the thing that occurred to me was Kirk, Spock, McCoy. Kirk, Spock, McCoy. And this
Knew
is, you know, the ultimate thing. And I started when I first discovered Star Trek. And so that's the only, that's the only show I had. And so you just watched that friendship. And I was reading a lot of news magazines and fan magazines about those three. And so they would call them the triumvirate, and they would say these are the three. It's kind of like the Three Musketeers, and it's Kirk, Spock, McCoy. And but in every episode you really could see, some more than others, but you could really just see the strength of that friendship, that relationship. And I used to think to myself, man, that's all I want, when I grow up, is I want friends like that. I don't even care really if I have, like, romance is good, partnership is good, marriage is good, but gosh, I want those lifelong friends that are always going to be there for each other. And you fast forward to like Star Trek 5, think it's Star Trek 5. And Kirk is down on the planet and he's got this, this ship aimed at him, about to, like, I don't know if it's Star Trek 5 I'm thinking of or not. But when they said to him, he said, I knew I wasn't going to die. And they said, how'd you know you weren't going to die? And he's like, I was never alone, because Kirk and Spock were always with him, or McCoy and Spock were always with him. So I feel like that really killed me, because then in real life, when DeForest Kelley and Leonard Nimoy, they passed on first. And now William Shatner is alone. And I thought, oh man, it was so weird. Like that moment paralleled real life for me. But I just really always have longed for, and I don't mean you have to be in the military in order to have friendships like that. Cause I'm like, well, I haven't served with anybody to the point that I've had to save somebody's life, but is that what I'm missing? But I thought, gosh, is that even reality for a friendship? Is that a real thing?
I feel like, I do feel like it depends. Like there are people who I think that one of the things that like we make a mistake of in terms of like as human beings is that we tend to assume that just because something's lasted a really, really long time, it's somehow more special than other things, right? So like, they had a very long, long, long
Yeah.
friendship, obviously that started in the 60s, like not, I mean, like it didn't really start in the 60s, but started in the original series all the way into, the end. But I think that like I feel like it's hard for relationships in real life to last that long because of how people change and how, one of the things that like that doesn't happen a lot in Star Trek is like these guys are always on the spaceship, right? So like even when we were watching Wrath of Khan yesterday, so he's an admiral now and he's not on the spaceship and he's miserable and unhappy and he feels old, like Kirk is, and he wants to get back into the ship. And like their friendship seems to grow when they're in proximity and when they're on ships together, right? So I feel like that's part of the problem with our friendships today is that we're not forced into a situation where
Yeah.
you're literally
Yeah.
day in and day out with someone else like all of the time, which is almost like a spousal relationship just without, marriage. But like college, you do that, right? Because you live with people in college or roommates or things like that. I think it's tough to create that kind of friendship without having like communal living,
I thought
with
Yeah, that's why they were so close, because they were in the military together. So they had
Wait,
because
Star Trek isn't the military. It's an
well, it's like a
allegory for the military.
pure military. It's a service. Let's just call it the service.
The service. They were in the service together.
Because when I have clients that have served together and they've been on campaigns together, and they are very, very tight. I mean, they are tight the rest of their lives. And it's one of those things where even if they, retire, or they leave the service, they go on to civilian life. Maybe they live bi-coastal, one's in Maine, one's in California. But if they get on the phone and say, I need you to be here right now, that guy is going to get on the plane and fly over there. And it's like, these relationships are, I mean, that's kind of, so Julian and Miles. All right. So here's one. So the other night I was watching the one where they were in Sloane's brain.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's Section 31.
Because they were trying to get the secret out of him before he died, and they had to go inside his brain to figure it out. So
I'm just gonna pause, and in this story, they're trying to find a way to cure their friend who's sick, and Sloane is the only one he knows the antidote, and it's only in his brain.
Mm-hmm. But because Sloane is a spy for Section 31, he's activated an implant that will kill him before he'll give away that secret, because Section 31 feels so strongly that the cure for this disease cannot be given to the other side. So can't let the Dominion know the cure. But Odo's going to die. So Miles O'Brien and Dr. Bashir get permission from Captain Sisko to go inside. And this is a really dangerous, which probably, these types of missions probably also solidified their friendship, because if you think about it, Dr. Bashir and Miles went on a lot of really dangerous missions, and their lives were at risk a bunch of times they were together. And they come to this point where they really feel like, I think it's Miles has been shot, and it's like, they know it's not real, but he's going to die anyway, because if Sloane dies, they die.
It's one of my favorite scenes.
Dr. Bashir is trying to get him to admit that he likes him a little bit more than he likes Keiko, which is his own wife. And he's like, well, you're like Keiko, but except you're a guy. And he's like, so you like me as much as you like Keiko? And he's like, maybe you like me a little more than you like Keiko. And he never admits it.
You love your wife,
but you love.
It's just that you like me more.
And it's so funny. And that friendship, if you go back and watch early episodes of DS9, it wasn't there in the beginning. I mean, that had to grow. They
couldn't stand each other.
Yeah.
Well, actually, Miles couldn't stand him, and Julian was chasing after Miles like a puppy.
Yeah, and it had to take off from there, and they became so close. I mean, it almost felt like a kind of marriage in a way.
It really did. In fact, Keiko made a lot of jokes about that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, these kinds of, and I look at that and go, they were all on the space station together. So they really got to know each other, and they were like, you're right. It's like living in college in a dorm.
Yeah. It's like when you're living around people like all the time, I feel like you develop a different type of relationship. And I mean, that happens with family, that happens with your spouse. Like, I feel like that's sort of like where that comes from, is like the 24/7 access to somebody just because they live right next door.
I had neighbors like that when I lived in my townhouse and I was by myself, but there was a married couple next to me. They didn't have kids. And one of their favorite things to do was just sit out in the front, and they had a fire pit, and they would let the fire pit go. And then they had their dogs, their golden retrievers would be out there with them. And we would hang out, and the wife would open a bottle of wine, and we would just sit there. And sometimes we'd play card games, and we would just talk. And this was almost like every day. If I came home and put my garage door up, and as I'm pulling in, I see them out there, I'd just be like this, coming over. And I came over, and this was fantastic because, yes, proximity. I mean, we were always together, and it was so easy to just knock on the door and be like, hey, you want to do something? I mean, it was the coolest thing. But when we moved apart, we totally lost touch. Totally.
I wonder, do you think the internet has anything to do with, like, do you think it's a sign of the times, right? just that like we're all so separated now, and we mostly we're on the internet, like that kind of thing. Do you think it's that kind of a thing, or do you like what do you think has changed? Because like I know that I don't have relationships like that like I did in college anymore, where I feel like
Maybe. I think it's weird because I've got a lot of clients who come in to see me, as a therapist, and they come in to talk. And one of the things, especially among women, is saying they're lamenting the lack of friendships, just the lack of close friendships, and asking, how do you make friends when you're in your 30s or in your 40s?
mm-hmm.
And, because you're out of college, and those college friends may have scattered across the country. They might not be a part of your life anymore, or you don't have anything in common with them anymore, and your life has changed, and you're married and you have little kids maybe, but how do you meet and make friends? Long lasting, really good friendships. Where do you get them? And nobody has the answer to this. Nobody. But I just want you to know that everybody's asking this question. So in case you've ever wondered, you're not alone, because this is I think it's a huge problem. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's just the lack of close friendships we just don't have. And people do, to answer what you just said, maybe they're turning to Reddit, or they're turning to other places on the internet to connect,
Yeah.
because we don't have people in real life anymore. And I know for myself, we moved into this neighborhood, and like the neighbors on either side of us they're both retired, and they're just in a very different place in their life than I am. So I like them, and I would go drink a glass of wine, but I don't really have much in common with them. I don't think we're ever going to be close. So like, I feel like just where am I supposed to go as a 50-year-old woman with teenage kids and my own business? Where am I supposed to go to like connect? And you don't have a lot of time because there's other demands on me.
Yeah.
So how do I make friends in close proximity that are going to be deep, long lasting, the kind of person you can call when you're just really in trouble and you just need to talk to somebody? That's People don't have it anymore. It's really missing.
It's so interesting you say that, because as you were talking, like I was talking to Christy Dawn, who is actually was my guest for a lot of the episodes 54 and 55, and we actually ended up taking longer because we were talking about doulas and friendships and relationships. And one of the things that ended up coming out was this idea that like over the last, say, if you think back to say 100 years ago, communal living and more like what's the word, multi-generational homes were more common.
Yeah.
So like where it would be like, okay, so there's a house with like the grandparents and the kids and then their kids, and so there's like 10 people living in this house and 10 people living in this house, and like the houses are, there's a lot of people living in the house, at once. And so now kids are going outside, they're all about the same age, they're all playing together. And I feel like the way that the world was structured before, especially pre-COVID of course, but like 100 of years ago, so way pre-COVID, was designed more to create those friendships. And like it wasn't common for people to say, oh, I'm going to move from here to like, California, or I'm going to move from
Yeah.
here to like, like these relationships continued through family lines, and like, oh, I've been friends with them for like 20 years or that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And even growing up in Pakistan, my family migrated from India in 1950 something, but a lot of people came at the same time because everybody was leaving because of partition. So a lot of people came at the same time. So people from the village that my grandparents came from, they all came down into Karachi. And so like those relationships continued because now this community was transplanted and they needed their community, right?
Oh,
But
yeah.
like the way that we live now is so nuclear, right? And like individualized, that I think that we don't put ourselves out in spaces where you'd meet more people. So like for example, I actually have found recently that I'm actually meeting a lot of great new people constantly, and it's through my networking group and through participating in local events. And I'm meeting writers, and I'm meeting, and like so far I wouldn't say that any of these people are like my lifelong friend that I'm gonna like talk to forever, but like they're all friendships that are like they're good friendships. I'm enjoying them, that kind of thing. And so I feel like, whereas before it kind of just happened, now we have to be more intentional about it. But
Oh,
like
yeah,
there's no
for sure.
time, right? Because like you said, it's like, okay, that's how we do it. Great. Where am I going to find the time?
Yeah, because I mean, I was thinking about wanting to get more involved in just, I don't know why it occurred to me, but I wanted to get involved in local government. And I thought, let me just take a stab at maybe city council or something like that. And they had this opening. Well, they created a whole new board. So we were a whole new board of cultural arts committee for the city. And this has been a really great experience because it's gotten me out and it's gotten me into the community and working with other boards and mingling with many different people in my hometown, everybody local, and you're going all towards the same goals. You have things in common that you all want. You're working together for a better city, better hometown. Because I think what happens is, and like you said, COVID, of course, affected this, but now everyone's, well, I like to work from home, or I would like to, I'll just Zoom it, I'll Zoom call.
Yep.
Because you and I have never met in person.
It's true. Not once, but we will.
We will. We got close to it, but
Very latest, it'll be 2024 cruise.
but that's the kind of thing that happens today. And, I find it really interesting because some of the people that I've made connections with online are when something happens to them, I hurt very badly. And, we had, I don't know if I talked about this last time on the last podcast we did, but when COVID hit and there was one of the admins of the large Star Trek Facebook group, it's like Star Trek, and it has like 20 admins. It's huge. So, but there was a little scuffle between a couple admins, and it's weird because I'm friends with both of them and they just had personality clash. But one of them wanted to do some Star Trek themed games, crossword puzzles, word searches, even Sudoku, like things like that. And he was posting these games, and some of the other admins said, that's not what this site is for. I wish you would stop doing that. And so he broke off from the Star Trek and he started his own page on Facebook and he started inviting people. And so some of us followed him because we liked the games. We were playing the games. Well, then COVID hit. And I'm telling you, this guy got us through isolation, being stuck at home, because there was about 20 or 25 of us that were hardcore. We all got to know each other. We were from all over the United States and the world. And this one guy united us with these games because he made us compete with each other for points. And when we earned a certain number of points, we could win the right to choose a character or a ship. And we could start building our own little team, our armada. You could have specific ships, like you could take the Defiant, you could take the Enterprise. Marina was in this group. She liked to collect all of the, she collected Wayun. She liked the Vorta. She wanted to have all the Vorta.
I love the Vorta. They're amazing.
She collected every single one. And there was one other girl, Deonta, and she really liked to collect Klingons. And so I of course had to collect Saru. I'm like, nobody takes Saru. Like, he's mine. So this guy, his name was Robert Benson. And it was just so much fun because he would post who won. And sometimes we would get into little kind of fights with each other, because we'd be really close in points and we would be like, who's going to be, my husband was in the group. And then they found out that Marina at the time was only 12. And they were like, because sometimes she would kick their butt in a game and just hand them their ass. And they would be like, wait, how old is she? Because I would let it slip. And they're like, you mean a 12-year-old just kicked my ass? I'm like, yes, because she knows Voyager cold. Voyager, she knew everything. So if there was some trivia thing, she's got it. So it was a couple years we were involved all together, and we always talked about, hey, one of these days we should do a get together, and we should from all corners of the world, but we should do this reunion, and we should all meet up, and we should get to know each other in person. And because we really began to care about each other. Catriona had some hospital, she went in the hospital for some leg issues, and we were all worried about her. And then Robert, he wound up getting sick, and he had some kind of cancer, and he said, look, I have to put the games on hold for a minute because I have cancer treatments. And we were really worried about him. And so we started to care about each other. And I've never before had a relationship that formed on the internet where I felt so close to these people that, every day we were getting on the phone. And if Robert uploaded a game, I would immediately text Marina, even if she was in school. Marina, there's a new word search. Go get it. Because he would let everyone get 2. And we had to get you had to hurry up. And it was
hurry up.
And Robert, he kind of kept the seriousness of his illness from most of us. So we thought, and we knew it was bad, but I think in the back of your mind, you always think, but they're going to pull through. They're going to be okay. And I was on the cruise actually, and Catriona sent me a private message and said that Robert's wife had just contacted her to say that he had passed away. And,
Oh,
and here I am on this Star Trek cruise, which is the one thing I always told Robert he would love. He would love that so much. And he never had the chance to go. And I just, I'm on the top deck of the ship and we were in port, and I started crying, and I called Marina over and I said, Robert has passed away. And, oh my God, this is a man I never met. I never even did a call like this with him. I mean, he had us writing some stories one time because he started a story and he said, I want each of you to add to it. I want you to add a few pages, and it's a Star Trek themed story, but we're going to go wherever you want to go. It's fan fiction. You take it wherever you want to take it. It was based on what Cisco did after he fell into the fire caves with Pa Race.
yeah.
He went to be with prophets, and what happened when he eventually returned. So he gave us the opportunity to write that story is what happens. And I wrote a chapter of it, and he said to me, I really love your writing. I think you're an amazing writer, and this is very good. And it was just very meaningful to me that he gave me that shout out, and I just really felt like it was a real relationship. I mean, to me, he was a real friend, as true as anybody that could be right next door. So his death was really, really hard to process. And it still is, because we get together sometimes and we will post in the group, the group is still sitting there, because we weren't admins of it. And I kind of wish that he'd made one or two of us admins so we could do something, but we'll just, every now and then we'll post on there and be like, and we can't, because we're not admins, we can't have the post. So we will just comment underneath an older post, but everybody sees it, and we'll say, man, Robert, I miss you so much. And I wish you were here to get us through whatever the thing is. And one of the guys in the group, Michael, he sent Catriona and myself some surprise figurines this last Christmas.
Oh, wow.
And it was a total shock. And I said, Michael, and again, someone else I've never met. And I said, when you sent that, I feel like, that's something Robert would have done. Because he did. If someone won a game and they got a whole bunch of points, he would send them like a model of a ship, And it was just, people like that don't come along very often. And, why did he have to, why did we lose him? And it's just that is a friendship born of a Star Trek connection, and really meant so much to all of us. And there was some people in the group that said, I want to find a producer somewhere that can name a character after him. And can we contact anybody? Now, unfortunately, my guy is not involved anymore. Or I might have been able to help.
There's only so many names to give out. But
I think
you hit upon something like really important, which is that so when I was in my early 20s, I played World of Warcraft a lot, and Guild Wars, and then World of Warcraft, and I developed a lot of friendships from there. And I think that you were talking about having these long-term friendships, but the truth is that I think you can have short friendships that are incredibly impactful and meaningful. Yeah. And with the world where we are now, a lot of them are online. So I have some very, I think that when we were younger and in the initial stages of the internet, we tended to be, and you and I are old enough to where we remember where people poo-pooed on online relationships.
Like stranger danger, man.
It was you'd be like, oh, I have an online friend. Oh, okay. Yeah. That's not a
They're
real friend. All right. Yeah.
It's probably some 75-year-old guy who's a pervert,
So I think it's really different for, say, Marina's kids who are Marina's age, because they're growing up in this space where they're developing relationships and friendships online, and there's no difference for them in turn, because they were never treated with the same stigma as they were for us, which is great for them, because now they have different ways of growing relationships. But, but this relationship you had with Robert, or the relationship that you have with, their other friends in there, or the people that you maybe only see on the Star Trek cruise or only in this group, those are all real friendships based off of common interests, right? Which is essentially how those friendships are created. The old-timey friendships were created off of our common interest because we all lived in the same area and our general proximity was our common interest. Now we're finding ways to create friendships with people that are based so much more on our core beliefs and our core, so I feel like I have a lot of very short, intense friendships that you meet, they last a few years, there's so much to be gained for both people, and then you just kind of fade away, and then you move into something else.
It's because I think of that poem that is out there that says you're friends with someone for a reason or a season or a lifetime. Mm-hmm. And so some people are going to be a lifetime, but some people, there was a season that you needed to get through with somebody. But when the season is over, you don't need the person anymore. So they're gone, and it's okay. So I tell that to my clients a lot. And I think, going back to what you're saying about the internet, and I'll get these teenagers to see me and they've got these really intense relationships online. And of course, I do try to guide them with like, you know, managing the emotional impact of all of
Mhm.
that.
Well,
But they
because
have,
teenagers, every relationship's emotional. So
yeah,
it's,
and right. And then when you're online, it's far too easy to just ghost somebody and they're
yeah,
on forever. And then you don't have any recourse because you can never find out what happened. But in most of these cases, the parents do not consider these relationships to be legitimate because they
really.
take
Okay, so
place
that's still
online.
something that's going on now.
Yeah, and parents poo-poo it kind
Interesting.
of. They're kind of like, well, that you don't know who you're talking to. That could be some 90-year-old guy or whatever the thing is. And since you can FaceTime now and do those sorts of things, I guess it's probably harder to catfish. But I
You have to
think,
do your due diligence and critical thinking, but like the
yeah,
problem is when you're like that age, you don't have a lot of that. Like, when you're
these kids are
14,
smart and they
15,
know how to research it though. They do
true
know how to
that.
figure it out. They
But
can
you
vet
have to
somebody in
actually
five
like
seconds.
not fall into the web, right? So it's like if you see them like, God, you're amazing, you're not even gonna think about researching. But if the parents like, no, 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 then the kid has to like try to prove that no, it's a real person
Yeah.
and due diligence is
They
done.
can really vet somebody in like 5 seconds. And Marina taught me that. And I was like, holy cow. Having the relationship that I had with Robert Benson taught me that those are very legitimate friendships. They're just as real as somebody that's standing 10 feet from you. So I have a lot more
Absolutely.
compassion now, having gone through that, for the teenagers who come into me and say, look, I have this serious relationship with someone that online, and we've been talking for like 6 months. I feel that now.
Yeah.
I didn't understand that before, but boy, I do now. So, dude, look at how much the world has changed.
I know, right? Like I didn't, what's funny? I love doing podcasts with you because we start on one thing and then we kind of just
I
we
know.
like we'll go all over the place and but I feel like this is all shit that we're all dealing with, right? Like I
Yeah.
just I love that with this I love the direction that we went in with in terms of having long-term friendships. So I'm gonna, as we wrap up, because I was like, oh, don't worry about it. I told Alex, I was like, don't worry. I was like, we've got our thing, it's probably gonna be about 40 minutes. And I was like, I realized we could probably go into like 5 or 6 at this point. So what I would love to do is, now that we've been talking a lot about friendships and talking a lot about how to make friends. So I want to, you are a therapist. So what I would love is if someone were to come to you and be like, listen, I do want to make friends as an adult, and or whether they're for a season or for a lifetime or what have you, would you have any recommendations for my listeners?
I think, where I start is, what are your passions? What are things that you really connect with? Because some people are musical and some people love to volunteer and some people are artistic. And so there's all kinds of ways that you can throw yourself into community activities. And through those activities, you meet people that are like-minded, whether maybe you have a certain political leaning and you want to join a group about that, but you will make friends where you already have something in common, which is kind of
Mhm.
the same way I suggest people meet potential romantic interests. Go after what you love, go after your passion. And while you're doing something that you love, if you're volunteering with animals at the shelter, you are probably going to make a bunch of friends who love animals just as much as you do. And you're bonding over that. And that can
Mhm.
lead to, hey, let's go get coffee, and I mean, it's a numbers game. It probably takes like meeting 50 people maybe to get one really, really close friend. But the only way you're going to do it is to step out and try. So I just suggest that they start with who they are and what are their favorite things, because there's no point in trying to meet somebody that has nothing in common with you. You may as
You're
well,
not going to want to
if
be around
you
that person anyway.
yeah, if you love to, I mean, we have like this community orchestra here that is made up of retired music teachers and teenage students who want to learn to play music better, but they don't require any kind of audition or anything. You can just ad hoc join this band and they play several times a year. I think things like that are great. Do you have a past history with a trombone? Go join them and just meet people, and you might find some fun personality types, and they'll probably say, let's go get something to eat after the concert. Sure. And then you exchange numbers and you text and whatever. There you go. You're off and running and you're meeting people. So, I mean, we even have, there are people in our area, and some of them, I've had a client of mine that came and said, she was so funny because she said, man, I am so tired of being lonely and I can't find anybody. So I'm just going to start a meetup group and I'm going to call it Meetup Canton. And I'm going to say, this is a group for anybody that wants to meet up. And if you're in your 40s or 50s, whether you're married or single or divorced, I don't care. Just come to this group. We're going to meet up. And she started this thing. And people, she said, we're going to have a beer at, Reformation Brewery. And 10 people showed up the first night. She's like, hey, great, meet up Canton. And then every month they started doing meetups. She just started it because she was sick of being alone. So, you can do that. If you have the gumption, you can do that.
You know who did that? Jill Salzman did that. She was on the podcast like last month or the month before, and she was like she's entrepreneur, and she was like, oh my god, I'm like a business mom, and this is so hard, and I'm so lonely, and I can't figure it out. So she just made a post saying, I'm getting together here. Anyone who owns a business, who's a mom, come join me. And she had like 20 people show up on like the first day, and she started founding moms from that, because she was like, everybody was looking for that same thing. So, I think that like what you just suggested is, if you're somebody who has the gumption, right, then set it up. And then if you're someone who doesn't have the gumption, look for people like Jill who are setting something up that you can jump in on, because like you don't have to be the one. I love this. This is really great advice, Elaine. Elaine, it's been so good hanging out with you again. We're gonna have to do this again. We should probably like do this quarterly, and like we'll start with Star Trek and just see where it takes us. So
I
fun.
know. And we could probably poll people and ask them what they want us to talk about. Like, what would they like to hear?
That would be delightful. And I'm going to post a link for the group. So you can email me the link to the group tonight so that I can join it immediately. And then everybody else gets to join it later on. But yeah, I want to join that Star Trek Friends group. I can't believe I'm not in it.
Mark Sickle is the admin, and he is trying to hit 10,000, and we're really close. So maybe we can do it and push him over.
Alex and I will both join. So send me the link. We'll join it tonight.
Okay, awesome.
All right, awesome. You are the best. I am so hungry. I'm going to go eat now, but I love you. You are amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. This was a blast.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye.